Hi, this time I'm going to be talking about, first of all, Josephus, a historian. I think some people say an historian or a historian, doesn't matter. He is an historian from the first century who lived shortly after Jesus died. He was born, and he was born into a very wealthy family in Israel. At the age of 16, he went off into the desert and joined himself to a hermit called Banus, and Banus lived off the land. He, much like John the Baptist, but perhaps even more extreme in the way that he lived, in that Banus only ate what was found in the desert, which is, I think, exactly what John the Baptist did. He clothed himself only with what he found in the desert from the trees. He also took baths twice a day in cold water in order to, as Josephus claims, in order to preserve his chastity. At the age of 20, after spending 3 years with this hermit, he went back to Jerusalem and he became a Pharisee. And as a Pharisee, he was sent to Rome to help release some prisoners that were in Rome. In Rome, he was fascinated, absolutely flabbergasted, and impressed with their culture, everything about Rome, and especially their army. He just thought this was the end of the end all, of the best and the greatest. He goes back to Jerusalem, having spent time with powerful people in Rome, and having spent time and actually being able to release and get the release of these prisoners. And so he goes back kind of as a hero, a minor hero, perhaps minor. I don't know, but definitely he was recognized by this point. Because by the time he got to Jerusalem, rebel factions had taken over. And the rebel factions, they'd been there all along, but they never gained the popularity they did. And in fact, I'm not so sure they were all that popular. They helped create a division within Jerusalem and within Judah. Division between people who wanted to join in thinking those people, these different groups of rebels, they're helping us. They're going to get us freedom and give us freedom. But then there's others who say, no, they're just trouble. They're going to be trouble for the nation, and Rome's going to come in and destroy us. Now remember, when Jesus was coming into Jerusalem, what did the leaders say when they saw him coming in? They were afraid. They said, we're afraid that the whole nation's going to follow them, and Rome's going to come in and destroy us. And then one stands up, the high priest, and he says, no, it's necessary for one to die rather than the whole nation perish. Well, one died for the nation. And what he's trying to say is it's better to let one go, Jesus. In other words, they knew they were going to be delivering a righteous man over to death, but they were willing to do that because they believed that they needed to protect the country from Rome coming in and taking everything. Be that as it may, what had happened is all along there were these rebel groups, and they're not your middle class and higher class. These are people born in poverty. These are people who are on the bottom of society, and they get leaders, and they follow these leaders, and they do all kinds of crazy things. Some were killed and destroyed by Rome, but some survived, especially towards 65, 66 A.D. More and more they gathered and they fought each other. They just despised each other because each one of them wanted to take over Jerusalem on its own. Nevertheless, they had, by the time Josephus was coming back, and they had already taken over Jerusalem. Rome was not too happy about that. And so for the next 3 years, there's going to be war between them and Rome, ending up in complete tragedy. So when Josephus got back into Jerusalem, they made him a general and gave him charge over Galilee. And so he went up to Galilee, even though he kind of has a respect for Rome. Nevertheless, he goes up to Galilee and he builds his army up there. He strengthens 5 cities, but those cities are quickly taken. And he and his 40 comrades, and he and actually 39, I don't know if it's 39 or 40, but either way, they all hide out in this cave for a while and decide, we don't want to give ourselves up to Rome. And so they make a pact to kill each other, kind of a suicide thing. So they all killed each other until it got down to the last two, our general, Josephus, and somebody else. And Josephus says, hey, let's go surrender. That's what they did. So those two surrendered to the army of Rome in captivity. He prophesied. Josephus did. He prophesied to the general of the Roman army taking over. And he prophesied, and he said, you will become the emperor. Now, Nero died shortly thereafter, who was the emperor. And when Nero dies, Vespasian holds on to Josephus, doesn't want him dead because he wants to see if this prophecy really happens. Sure enough, within a few months, his soldiers are all making him emperor. The army, Rome's army, entire army, I guess, I don't know, it just says Rome's army makes him the next emperor. And now he believes Josephus has the gift of prophecy. And he lifts Josephus out of his slavery or out of captivity, and he makes him a free man with a citizenship and honor from Rome itself. And at this point, Josephus begins working with Vespasian's son, who taking over Judah. So he's working with the son, and the son's name is Titus. So Josephus is working side by side with Titus, and what he's doing is trying to mediate. Okay, how can we get the Jews not to rebel, not to fight us, but how can we get them to just behave? They don't want to have anything to do with behaving, and especially with somebody, a Benedict Arnold, like Josephus. Come on, 38 of your companions laid down their lives for Israel. And what are you doing? You're turning to the side of Rome. And so it didn't work out too well. Besides, by this time you had rebels in charge of Jerusalem. And things are not going to go well. The gang of rebels actually give Rome a run for their money. They do pretty good. They win a few battles. And that encourages them. That makes them feeling all the better. We're going to do this. We're going to conquer. God is with us. And during this time, I want to back up a little bit, because even 4 years before the war began, 4 years before, when there was prosperity in Jerusalem, things were going well, this farmer, Jesus ben Ananias of Damascus, a rude peasant, Josephus calls him, begins talking every day in the streets. A voice from the east, a voice from the west, a voice from the four winds, a voice against Jerusalem and the sanctuary, a voice against the bridegroom and the bride, a voice against all the people. For 7.5 years he did this daily, walking the streets of Jerusalem. He was arrested. He was punished. He was taken to the Roman governor, who had him whipped to the bone. But during this time, he never cursed anybody beating him. He never cursed anybody torturing him. And those who gave him food, he never thanked. But his words were just constant. Now, the Roman governor thought this guy was just mad. He was crazy. And he constantly said, "Woe to the city of Jerusalem." And on his last day, when the armies were now outside the gates of Jerusalem, and Jerusalem had shut its gates with myriads of people because they shut it when there was a celebration, when there were many people in there. A celebration, I should say a festival. And there were so many people in there, and they don't have a lot of supplies. At least they don't have supplies that are going to last very long. And during this time, Ananias, over and over again shouts, trying to shout above the crowd sometimes, "Woe is this city." And one day he says, "Woe once more to the city and to the people and to the temple, and woe unto me also." Shortly thereafter, a stone hurled from the ballista of Rome struck and killed him on the spot. The siege lasted 5 months. Now, during that time, tyrants, before I move on, I need to explain what tyrants were, because it's used, the name is used, the word tyrants is used occasionally by Josephus. I don't know enough of Josephus yet to be able to come up with my opinions about what a tyrant is. However, there is a professor from the University of Jerusalem, the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, Stephen ben Yishai, and he believes, and having studied Josephus in depth, he believes that tyrants were renegade aristocrats. In other words, very wealthy people, but they were renegade in that they were siding with the rebels. However, because they're such higher class, they're not going to kind of just, hey, you poverty-stricken, poor people, lower class prophets, can you do us a favor? But rather, they instigate it through others. And so these prophets are all encouraged to prophesy among the people and throughout Jerusalem. And what they prophesy is this: Jerusalem will be saved. God will perform a miracle. You are going to see a miraculous event happening. And these people will be gone. And they encouraged the people. Now, Josephus says this was in order to keep the people from deserting, and that they might be buoyed up above fear and care by such hopes. In other words, these prophets are giving them all kinds of hope where there should not be hope, where they should be surrendering themselves over to Rome, the Roman army. These prophets are helping to keep them from doing so. I think those aristocrats didn't want to lose. They knew that if Rome took over, if Rome got their houses would be taken, their wealth would be gone. They would no longer be the ones above the rest. A few years later, Josephus wrote 7 books covering about 150 years up to the fall of Jerusalem, and it's called The War of the Jews. And he describes what happens in these books when the Roman soldiers came into Jerusalem, because the gates eventually collapsed. They got into Jerusalem. And it was a feeding frenzy of slaughter, rape, plunder, rage. They had been chastised by Israel for months, for years, and they were to the point of, we don't care anymore about these people. Josephus describes blood putting out fires because there was so much blood shed. He talks about corpses, so many on the streets that Roman soldiers had to walk over them, had to run over them to get to where they needed to go. Romans did not want to destroy the temple. It was a masterpiece. However, people ran to the temple because they believed that God would save them in the temple. God wouldn't destroy the temple. It just couldn't happen. But the Roman soldiers burned down treasury chambers, and in the treasury chambers they found money and garments, precious goods, riches heaped together. One of the cloisters held 6,000 men, women, and children, a mixed group of people. Why were they in that one cloister, and why so many? Well, it turns out that day there was a prophet going around, and he was telling everybody, go to the temple, because a miracle from God is going to happen, and we will see. We will see the miracle of God, and you will be delivered. And so the people followed. And in that cloister, believing that they were going to see a miracle before them, they were burned. And the ones who weren't burned jumped out of the cloister and died, because it was a far distance from the cloister to the ground. Now, in the end, Josephus blames that prophet for those 6,000 people dying. In the end, the entire temple was burned down. In the end, Jerusalem fell. In the end, Israel ceased to be a nation. Israel and Judah had completely been destroyed until 1948, when they once again became a nation. There are so many lessons for today throughout this story, and I'm just now getting into all this stuff, and I know there's so many lessons for today. But I want to leave you with this and ask you, what kind of lessons do you see in this? Do you see parallels that we could say is happening in our world today? And this is Ted. You all have a good day.